Hi everyone and welcome to our geography lesson. For this project, we have been tasked to create and teach a lesson on topographic maps, focusing on land use and cultural features. In this lesson, we are going to explore how people use land and primary activities such as farming and mining evident on a topographic map. Each of us will be teaching a different section of the topic, and by the end, you'll be able to identify cultural features and explain what they tell us about the area shown on a map. So let's get started. Imagine you are a detective, but instead of solving crimes, you are solving the mystery of how people use the land around us. Every road, school, church, or even a soccer field is a clue. Topographic maps are like treasure maps. They show us not only the mountains and rivers, but also how people live, build, and work in an area. And by the end of today's lesson, you'll be able to read these clues and tell the story of a place just by looking at its map. Before we begin exploring land use and cultural features, let's go through some important keywords that will help us understand topographic maps more clearly. First, topographic maps. A topographic map is a detailed and accurate map that shows both the natural and human-made features of an area. It uses contour lines, symbols, and colors to represent things like mountains, rivers, roads, and buildings. In short, it shows the shape of the land as well as how people use it. Next, contour lines. Contour lines are the thin brown lines that connect points of equal height on a map. They show how high or low the land is. When the contour lines are close together, the slope is steep, like a mountain or hillside. When they are far apart, the slope is gentle, meaning the land is flatter. Contour lines help us visualize the landscape in 3D, even though the map is flat. Cultural features. Cultural features are all the man-made things you can see on a map, such as roads, buildings, power lines, railways, and bridges. They show how people have changed and used the land. Land use. Land use refers to the different ways people use land. For example, for farming, housing, mining, industry, or recreation. It tells us how humans depend on the physical environment. Settlements. A settlement is in any place where people live. Settlements can be rural, like farms and villages, or urban, like towns and cities. The pattern of a settlement, whether the houses are spread out or close together, this tells us how people interact with the environment. Infrastructure. Infrastructure includes the systems that support human life. For example, roads, railways, electricity lines, pipelines, and communication networks. Agriculture. Agriculture is the practice of farming. It includes growing crops and raising animals to provide food or raw materials. Primary activities. Primary activities are jobs that involve using natural resources directly from the earth. For example, farming, fishing, forestry, and mining. Crop cultivation. Crop cultivation means the process of preparing land, planting seeds, and growing plants for food or for sale, like maize, wheat, or vegetables. Undulating terrain. Undulating terrain means that the land rises and falls gently, not flat but not steep either. It looks like rolling hills or waves on the land. And lastly, kraal. A kraal is an enclosed area usually made of wooden poles or wire used for keeping livestock such as cattle, goats, or sheep. On a map, Kraals often indicate traditional rural settlements or farming activities. Firstly, we are going to be learning about primary activities evident on a topographic map, specifically mining and farming. Let's take a look at mining. So, how do we identify that mining is taking place on a map? The following evidence indicates that mining is taking place. Conveyor belts, which assist in transportation of materials. Mine shafts, which are used to transport mine workers up and down a mine. Mine dumps and slime dams. The name of the mining company, example, Angoplat. And old diggings. Other clues include quarrying, which is the removal of stones from the earth's surface, and excavations, which is the process of digging, blasting, or removing materials from the earth. We can assume that quarrying or mining is taking place. Let's take a look at how these are shown on a topographic map. In the first extract, we see irregular dotted shapes. This indicates that diggings are evident. In the second extract, we see circular shapes with lines projecting outward. If it makes it easier to remember, they somewhat resemble the sun. And this tells us that they are mine dumps. In the third extract, we see many indicators of mining, such as conveyor belts, slime dams, the open cast mine indicated, and we see excavations. This is represented by an irregular shape with lines inside the shape. This can also reveal to us that quarrying is occurring as well. Remember, learners, you can find most of this information on the key of the topographic map. Always go to the map's legend for more clarification.
We're going to learn about farming. Farming is the practice of cultivating the soil, planting, and as well as raising animals. Now let's look at the primary activities that mainly practice in farming. These include crop cultivation, livestock, mixed farming, and as well as forestry. Now we're going to learn the various factors that favors crop cultivation. Factor number one, the land is gently sloping, which favors the use of machine. So, how to see that the land is gently on the topographical map? Yes, we can see that land is gently if the contour lines are far apart from each other. Factor number two, gently sloping land reduces the impact of soil erosion. Factor number three, fertile soil. If cultivation takes place on the banks of the river, which is floodplains. Factor number four, availability of water from either dams, canals, furrows, rivers, and windmills. Those are the factors that favors the crop cultivation. So right now, we're going to look at the extract of cultivated land. In the first picture there, we see brown contour lines that are spaced apart, indicating a, yes, gently slope. If the contour lines are far apart, which means it's indicating a gently slope. On the topographic map, cultivated land is shown by areas of green patches. If you can look closely, these patches are made up of small pairs of lines, which all put together make a big green looking patch. Let's look at the second picture. We see a floodplain as cultivation is taking place along the banks of the rivers.
Let's look at our next aspect of farming, Now, we all know the three types of farming, which are commercial, which is farming to sell, subsistence, which is farming on a small scale for farmers and their families, mixed farming, which is a combination of stock and crop farming. Can you identify which picture depicts commercial farming and which depicts subsistence farming? Picture 1 is commercial farming and picture 2 is subsistence. Were you correct? If not, let's understand why by tabulating the differences. Commercial farming. It is represented by large tracts of land enclosed by geometric shape boundaries. It has road links to market centers, factories, or mills. Housing for laborers can be found on the farm. Irrigation is used. Farm dams, canals, furrows. Subsistence farming. Small farms, tracks, and footpaths. Infrastructure is not well developed. Normally nucleated with small plots of land scattered around the village. Presence of huts.
Let's go on to our third type of farming. What is mixed farming? Mixed farming is a combination of crop farming and stock farming. So, how do we identify mixed farming on a topographic map? We can tell by looking for the symbols for dipping tanks, kraal, tracks, footpaths, and windmills. Mixed farming can be broken down into two categories, namely intensive and extensive farming. Intensive farming refers to farming that uses small areas of land but with high inputs of labor or technology to produce a large yield. Extensive farming refers to farming that uses large areas of land with low inputs of labor or technology to produce a lower yield. Let's look at how we can identify intensive and extensive farming on a topographic map. Intensive farming. Every available piece of land is used for cultivation. The farm area is smaller, which may be due to the farm being close to an urban area where land is more expensive. It is usually an area with gently undulating terrain, a short water supply, and fertile soils. Let's move on to extensive farming. Extensive farming refers to very large areas under cultivation but interspersed with vacant patches of land. The vacant land may be due to steep slopes, swamps, rugged terrain, or it is a low rainfall area. We are now going to look at the two patterns of farming and how they appear on a topographic map. There are regular and irregular farm patterns. Can you guess which of these pictures represents a regular farm pattern and an irregular farm pattern? Pause the video and think carefully. The first picture indicates a regular farm pattern and the second picture indicates an irregular farm pattern. It is indicated by farm boundaries that have a definite pattern that is a rectangular shape. The gentle gradient of the land determines the regularity of the farm pattern. For the irregular farm pattern, it has no definite shape and it has a hilly, steep, and uneven landscape, which contributes to the irregular farm shape. Sometimes we see symbols on a map and we just can't make sense of it. So let's look at three aspects to gain some clarity. First, let's look at windbreakers. Windbreakers? No, it's not actually what it sounds like. Farmers plant a row of trees as a windbreaker to prevent the loss of blossoms from fruit trees as well as to protect the crops from damage. Let us now understand how orchards and vineyards look on a topographic map. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's just a fancy way of saying fruit trees and grapevines. These farms are usually labor intensive. Vineyards are mainly cultivated in the southwestern Cape. The slope on which grapes are cultivated will depend on the end use. For example, table grapes are cultivated on the north-facing slopes because of the higher temperatures that are experienced. This speeds up the ripening process and increases the sweetness of the fruit. Grapes that are used to make vinegar are planted on the south-facing slopes because it is cooler. Thirdly, let's learn how to identify cattle or stock farming on a topographic map. Presence of a kraal, presence of tracks and footpaths to drinking water, dipping tanks, show grounds in urban areas for stock sales. Now that we've covered the key concepts like land use, settlements, and cultural features, let's take a look at this topographic map extract of Graafrenet, South, and apply what we have learned. Question 1. Look closely at the central part of the map. Can you spot an area with tightly packed contour lines around grid reference B3 and C3? What does this tell us about the slope of the land? Yes, the contour lines are very close together, which means that this area has a steep slope. Steep slopes are often found on hills or mountains and make it difficult for farming or large settlements to develop here. Question 2. Now, move your eyes towards the lower part of the map, around grid reference D3 and D4. You'll notice contour lines that are more spaced out. What does this indicate? That's right. Those are gentle slopes. This type of land is easier for building houses, roads, or for agricultural use. Question 3. Let's talk about cultural features. Look at the network of black lines running through the center of the map. What does these represent? These are road and railways, which are man-made features that connect settlements and show human activity. Question 4. If we look at the northern part of the map, we'll see a dense cluster of buildings and street patterns near the label Graafrenet. What type of settlement pattern is this? Rural or urban? Yes, this is an urban settlement. The dense patterns of roads and buildings shows a built-up area with lots of human activity. Question 5. Now we move westwards towards the Kamdebou National Park near grid reference B2. What type of land use do you think this area represents? Exactly, this is a conservation or recreational land use area. National parks are used to protect land use. National parks are also used to protect wildlife and provide space for tourism and outdoor activities. Question 6. If you look south of the main town, around the areas labeled Adendorp and Zonnebloem, you'll notice open fields and farms. What type of farming activity might be happening here? Intensive or extensive? That's right, extensive farming, because the farms cover large areas of land with fewer buildings, likely for livestock or crops. Question 7. Notice the blue lines across the map. These are rivers and streams. Around the Sundays River, you might find a flat area. What is that area called? It's known as a floodplain. Flat land next to a river that can flood during heavy rainfall but is very fertile for farming. Question 8. Look at the small circular enclosures marked near some farms in the southern part of the map. What do these enclosures represent? These are kraals, used for keeping livestock like cattle, goat, or sheep. They are typical in rural farming areas. Question 9. If you examine the terrain east of the town, you'll notice the contour lines gently rise and fall. What kind of landscape does this create? This creates an undulating terrain, meaning the land has gentle rolling hills, not flat but not steep either. For our last question, let's look at the golf course near Adendorp. What kind of land use is this? This represents recreational land use, an example of how people use land for leisure activities rather than farming or housing. Great job, everyone! You've just identified slopes, settlements, land uses, and human made features on a real topographic map. This shows how maps help us understand the connection between the environment and the way people live.
Maps are powerful tools. They connect the landscape with people's lives. Next time you see a map, don't just see it as lines and symbols, see the stories they tell. Thanks for joining us and happy map reading.